This video is designed to illustrate the proper method of installing a Striebig scoring unit to an existing compact panel saw. First thing we need to do is open the saw door and remove the saw blade. The next thing we need to do is pull the riving knife back and onto its keeper back there to keep it back. We next need to remove the non-scoring shroud. We do that by first removing the screw on the handle with your 5mm Allen wrench. And removing the handle at the end of the shroud. And then letting the shroud come forward just a little bit outside of the two guides, the top and bottom guides, and then the handle, the whole shroud will pivot out towards you and the handle just comes along with it. While we're inside the saw head here, we can loosen the left bolt of the pivoting arm that's in the back side of the saw casing, which will later put the tension on the belt that drives the scoring unit. In newer saws, this is a 10mm open end wrench that loosens the bolt. On older saws, there may be a screw here. We're just going to loosen it and let it float. Next, with the saw head over in the horizontal position and the back casing removed, we're first going to remove the counterweight that is in the place of where the scoring unit will go. That's 4 bolts with your T-handled Allen wrench, your 4mm Allen wrench. These screws are likely to be quite tight, so you may have to really crank on them to break them free. Usually you can just leave the 4 screws in place. And the counterweight, put your hand underneath and the counterweight will drop right out into your hand. The scoring unit goes on in the same place. The drive belt pulley side comes up through the hole. The brass part here comes up through a crescent-shaped opening in the saw casing over there. The flange can only be inserted one way, so you can't make a mistake and put it in the wrong way. But the brass round piece has to be through the hole, and the same screws that we took out of the counterweight are used to mount the scoring unit. And we want to snug them up good. Next step is to install the idler pulley with the flathead screw and the cone-shaped washer on top onto the plate that we loosened inside the saw casing. On an older saw, this plate will come with the scoring unit and needs to replace the plate that's in the saw now to accept this smaller pulley. Goes into the long point hole there, and again with your 5mm Allen wrench, tightens on there. Then the belt goes around the idler pulley, backs up to the drive pulley, the main arbor of the saw, and over the scoring pulley. We just flex it a couple of times for it to set its tension the way it wants to with the tension spring that's in there. Then we can put the head back over to the vertical position. So now we want to tighten the bolt that we loosened earlier, now that it has the proper tension on the belt set by the torsion spring that's inside the housing. So tighten that up with our 10mm wrench. The socket wrench works nicely for this. And while we're right here, we're going to remove the end of this torsion spring here from around that screw and let it act on the scoring unit. It's the spring that puts the tension on the scoring unit and keeps it up against the bottom of the inside of the shroud. We do need to remove this screw here with our 3mm Allen wrench. On some saws, older saws, this screw will likely be a regular cap head screw that may take a 4mm Allen wrench. Okay, now we can put the drawbar, which helps us engage and disengage the scoring unit, on. It has a particular little clip around the ball end of the drawbar that you need to unwrap it and pull it out. The drawbar goes through the keyhole slot in the front of the saw and snaps on to the ball end on the scoring unit, and the snap ring goes back in place. It goes lengthwise, be careful, don't want to lose this, through the hole in the ball. Sometimes this is easier with a pair of needle nose pliers. Go through the hole and snap it around the collar. There we go. Make sure that the drawbar works properly. Okay. Now we can put the shroud, the scoring shroud, onto the saw. Again, pull the scoring saw into the withdrawn position, pull the riving knife back. Now we want to put the scoring shroud on exactly the way, or the opposite way that we took the regular shroud out. We take the ball handle off and the screw out of the middle of the shaft, and we put the end of the handle with the spring through the hole at the end of the saw housing. Line up the split collar here with the saw housing there. Keep the shroud just enough in front of the shroud guides that it gets past it. Put the top and bottom into the shroud guides, push it just a little bit into the saw housing to enable us to put the ball end and attach the spring to the end of the handle. And put our little stop screw into the handle again. and tighten with our 5mm Allen wrench. We can now install the split blade scoring saw. This one is the version with shims between the two blades. I already have this set up to be 3.3 millimeters wide, which is 1/10 of a millimeter wider than my main saw blade. I've already measured my main saw blade to make sure that that's the case. Scoring saw rotation is this way, as indicated by this arrow here on the shroud. So even though the writing is on this side of the blade, I'm going to turn it this way and install it with my flange and my very fine thread Allen head cap screw and my 4mm T-handled Allen wrench. There's a small spanner wrench included in the scoring unit that I can use to snug it up. I can then put my main blade back on. I can close my door. I'm going to rotate the saw to the horizontal position so that I can examine my belt as I fire up the saw. Turn power back on to the saw. That's the proper belt tension. There was no wiggle or slop in the scoring belt drive, and it sounds nice and smooth. We can put the back casing back on, and our installation is complete.